What is going wrong in the Indian education system?
There is hardly anything Indian about Indian education, just that it is in India. Among people who are illiterates in India, unemployment is 3.4%. And among people who are graduates, unemployment is 29%.
Wow. Traditionally speaking, we had the Gurukul system. We were home to Nalanda and Takshasheela.
It created concepts. Ayurveda emerged there. Education was deeply personal. I think that is what we need to adopt. Education is not an information problem, but an inspiration problem. How will a teacher inspire a student to the habit of learning?
Education is incomplete without parents. What is the role of parents?
Swami Vivekananda used to say that education is the manifestation of perfection already in us.
Okay.
So there is a lot of knowledge and power within us, and then education is supposed to uncover that. A statement by Shantanu Narayan, who is the CEO of Adobe, that if he was growing up in India now, he would have never left.
So today we have somebody very interesting with us, because usually we either have students or we have teachers. But right now we have somebody who has been on both the sides. You have been a student in one of the best Indian universities, IIT Delhi, and now you are the co-founder and CEO of another brilliant university, that is Rishihoood University. So welcome to the podcast. My take on the Indian education system is this, that there are two things that are missing from the Indian education system. The first thing is education and second thing is system. So right now, one of the biggest problem that Indian graduates are facing is that they are not employable. I read the statistics somewhere that India produces most number of engineers in the entire world. But still, this is a statistic from IIT Bombay, which is the best engineering college in India, and still 36% of them will not get any placements. What is going wrong in the Indian education system? What do you feel?
So you said there are two things that are wrong in the Indian education system, two things that are missing. One is education, second is system. I'll say there are three things missing. Indianness is missing, education is missing, and system is missing, and we will cover them. Particularly when we look at the stats of employment, of how many graduates are coming, how many are going. So let's take a macro view of what is happening in the Indian youth population, youth demography. There are roughly 4 crore people who are currently in higher education. Our gross enrollment ratio is roughly 28%, which means that out of 100 people who are eligible or in that age group to be in education, only 28-29% are actually in a college. This number of roughly 4 crores is 1 crore enter every year, 1 crore exit every year from the education system. Now our task is, how do we find jobs or gainful employment for these 1 crore people? You're mentioning some of the top institutions, but 1 crore is a very large number, to provide employment to.
Right.
Now what is happening is, there was a very interesting study recently by the International Labour Organization, and they found out that among people who are illiterates in India, unemployment is 3.4%. Among people who have a secondary education, unemployment is 15%. And among people who are graduates, unemployment is 29%.
Wow.
So it's quite counterintuitive that you're studying more and unemployment is increasing, which means that either our education is not gearing them for a relevant job, which is a curriculum problem, or it means that there are not enough jobs in the economy, which is an economic problem.
But do you feel that it's a problem with our attitudes as well? I mean, just the way you mentioned that as the level of education grows, people's expectations grow as well. So I have 5 years ago, we had the series called 100 Reasons to Love India, where we would travel everywhere in India and talk to people, find stories and make 2 to 3 minute long videos about things that make India special. So while we were in Karnataka, somebody mentioned that when somebody crosses 10th standard, they feel that working in agriculture, working on their farms is below their level, below their standards. So do you feel this attitude needs to change as well?
It absolutely is a problem, and I love that series. I've seen some of the episodes from that series. What is happening is that across our education, we are focusing a lot on the content, that what is to be delivered, not on the habits or the attitudes or the soft skills. It is coming very late in life. When we get into the company, that is when we are first time in a work environment where someone tells us that you have to be disciplined, you have to be punctual. If someone asks you, you have to feel responsible and get things done. If I call you for a meeting at 9 a.m., then you have to show up at 9 a.m. These things are not part of a general,
Right.
educational ecosystem or educational curriculum. That is too theoretical, and that is an issue why when we graduate, out of college, we've never learned this. We've only learned that this was my, lesson plan, this was the theory, but then I realized it's not applicable at all in the real world.
And it's very strange that this is happening in India because traditionally speaking, we had the Gurukul system. I mean, we were home to Nalanda and Takshasheela. And a lot of times, people from abroad, international students would literally come over here to study. Right now, it seems unimaginable. So I keep talking to Niyu about this as well, that apart from a lot of things that we need to learn from the West, there are a lot of things that we need to unlearn from the West and go back to our roots as well. So coming back to that thing that you said, that the Indianness is also missing from our education system. What are the things that we should reintroduce in our education system that were present in Gurukul system?
Recently, our Prime Minister inaugurated Nalanda, I'll call it Nalanda 2.0, right?
Right,
Nalanda
right.
University's new campus.
Right.
Now, it is seen as one of the world's oldest universities, existed somewhere between 5th century to 13th century AD. What was happening there is, it was a center for deep learning where people from different parts of the world were coming to study subjects like astronomy, philosophy, language, Buddhist studies, etc., etc. We all know that, at a point, Khalji's army came and, put it to fire. The library kept burning, the famous story, and then the, scholars from there had to run away. Like that, it was not the only university. There were several other universities which created that economic strength of India. There is an Angus Madison report which tells that from 0 AD till roughly the end of 17th century, India and China were the top two economies of the world, India
Right.
being 1/3 of the global economy. That can only be supported when there is a large, educational base which creates that economy. So there was Takshasheela in today's Pakistan, there was Mithila University in today's Nepal, there was Somapura University in today's Bangladesh, there was Vallabhi universities in today's Gujarat. Like that, there are many universities. Along with it, there were Gurukuls. So there is a very interesting study by a person called Dharampal. Dharampal was a Gandhian scholar. He went to British archives and studied what they had recorded about Indian education system. What he found was very interesting. In 1830, a person, from the British staff presented a report to the empire about what's the status of education in India. This is from 1830. So he studied Bengal presidency, Bombay presidency, Madras presidency, Punjab presidency, and Bihar presidency. And he calculated, and Dharampal reports this, that there is roughly on an average one Gurukul per village,
Wow.
which is a very high number. Even at today's standard, Takshasheela was not just, any other teaching place.
Right, right.
It created concepts. Ayurveda emerged there. Arthashastra emerged there. Chanakya trained a whole cadre of students, and one of them became an emperor of,
Right.
still India's largest empire. There were studies in language. Panini created grammar there. Healthcare and Ayurveda. There was Panchatantra that emerged there. So like that, so much of research and development in education was happening in such places. We talk a lot about how do we assess the students? What can be the modern ways of evaluation? How can we make evaluation more authentic? Right? This is a common question that we
Right, right.
ask in education. Very interesting example from Takshasheela. So Atre is a rishi who is teaching there. He is a kind of a father of Ayurveda. He has a student named Jivak. So Jivak says that, Guruji, I've been studying here for a long time. I think now I'm ready to go and work. So Atre says, okay, now I'll have your exam. So Atre tells him to go to a nearby forest and find out some plants which don't have a medicinal value and bring all those plants back to Takshasheela.
Okay.
Jiva goes there, spends a few days, comes back, says, Guruji, I tried my best. I could not find a single plant which does not have a medicinal value. Atre says, now you are a graduate. Now you can go and serve the world. And this
Okay.
person, Jiva, goes on to become the personal physician to Lord Buddha.
Wow.
That was the power of that personalized, teaching, very customized kind of, evaluation. A lot of that which we can adopt today.
So one of the things that you mentioned was this value system that is currently missing from our education system. That just being there on time, just being disciplined, just having that respect for the elders, everything, these small things that make character. These things are missing and these things were there. So how do we plan to bring it back into our education?
We are largely moving towards a white collar MNC job economy.
Right.
That's the structure that we are moving towards. When that happens, what is happening in a family? All people are busy.
Right.
And because we have relocated from our hometowns to
We
the
have nuclear
metropolitans,
families,
we have
smaller
nuclear
families
families.
as well.
And in nuclear families, both parents are busy.
Right.
So there is no platform where a child can get that value and emotional nourishment. So that has then to be transferred to something like a school. But in the school curriculum or in the school economy, no one is expecting a school to be teaching that. Because no one is expecting to be teaching that. Parents are not demanding for their child to learn that in the school, and the teacher is not trained to deliver that. That same student, after spending 12 years in the school, is coming to the college. And college, the expectation is totally about placements. So in that whole 18-year journey of a child, from birth till the time they end up in a profession, there's no one who is teaching them values.
Right. And one of the very interesting thing that I had read was whenever there is any sort of colonization, be it in India or be it in Europe as well, the first thing that the colonizers did was attack the education systems. The same thing that we witnessed in Nalanda as well. That once the education system is broken, the backbone is broken, and then you can impose your own ideas over there. So, do you think that this thing that was systematically broken and introduced as the English way of education system, of course, there are a lot of things that are appreciable and it worked really well for us. But now we are at a position where we can evaluate that what is working for us, what is not working for us.
So how this happened was, I was telling you the stats about 1830.
Right.
What happened next was in 1835, Macaulay, whom all of us refer as Lord Macaulay, he presented the Minute of Education in the British Parliament. So there he said that we want a class of people which is Indian in its skin and blood, but English in its
Thoughts?
opinion and morals. Specific things that they did was they kind of, in summary, they stopped funding for this Gurukul kind of model of education and enhanced funding for an English way of education. The objective was to produce people who serve as clerks in the British Raj. To a large extent, we are continuing the same format of education where every student is going in kind of an industrialized format of education, that you are a batch, you enter a classroom, everyone is structured in the same way, you are learning the same curriculum in the same period of time, you're being assessed through the same mechanism, getting grades in the same metric, and eventually ending up in a job or the lack of it. This simply does not work because each human is built differently. So we'll have to find out ways which are highly customized, and that is what was happening in a Gurukul kind of a setup where education was deeply personal. I think that is what we need to adopt, and what we need to remove is that highly structured way of learning which is not resonating with the individuals.
What are the certain aspects that Rishihood is trying to bring back from our Indian education system to our current education system?
So today, when we are recording this, it's the International Yoga Day, right? And
yes.
Yoga is one of the most important, I think, gifts that India has given to the world. What we've done today is we've launched a yoga and wellness minor.
Oh.
Why I'm mentioning this is that we have to see human being in totality. It's not that yoga is something that I do as a hobby, and my profession is something else.
A more holistic approach, you can say.
A holistic approach. So what is this holistic approach? Holistic approach cannot happen without looking at the whole of the person, and spirituality plays a very important role there. So what we have done is, for example, we have made a category of time that students spend. We call it Anandam, which they spend on sports, they spend on yoga and meditation, they spend on farming and gardening, on music and dance. So they can choose among different kinds of activities which enhance the emotional and spiritual aspect of human life. And these are credited. These are credited time in the timetable. It's not that you can do when you want, you can not do when you don't want.
It's not a hobby. Once you commit to it, you commit to it.
You commit to it, exactly, for the whole semester, and that gets recorded in the CV.
And you're graded and everything.
You're graded, yeah. So when you graduate, the employer knows that this is a student who has spent 400 hours on a yogic practice, or 400 hours playing basketball, or 400 hours playing a violin. So when that happens, then the employer also knows that you are serious about something, which is otherwise missing.
And now all of these thoughts are wild. What is the birthplace of these thoughts? I want to know more about how you were as a student. Like, I have this theory, a wild theory, that most of the founders are backbenchers. So were you a backbencher? Were you a frontbencher?
I think it was a transition. Till my
Okay.
12th, I was pretty much in the first few benches
Okay.
because I was studying for JE.
Huh.
When I was inside IIT, I was, if I was on a bench, I was in the last, mostly I was out of the class.
Okay.
So I didn't like to attend classes much. But student life at IIT is something that we are not told about when we are preparing for it.
Okay.
We get in and then we realize, oh, this is engineering. It's a shock. And I was in mechanical engineering, and that's a major shock because we hardly have any idea of what mechanical engineer would be before
Okay.
we get there. So in my first week, I was clear that this is not what I can do for the rest of the 4 years of college degree. So I had to find other things.
Okay.
And fortunately, I would give credit to my mentors and peers that I got interested in this field of education, social work, social impact, entrepreneurship. I think the next 4 years became extremely exciting and satisfying because of that availability, which otherwise students may not have.
Going back to your student days, did you have any dark memories where you felt the pressure of getting selected, of these entrance exams and everything?
So it's very tough competition. There's just 10 lakh people fighting for 10,000 seats, right? So that pressure was always there. I was fortunate to have a family which was very supportive. So my father in a passing comment said that IIT nahi hoga to koi baat nahi, we'll create a new IIT. So that was a kind of a booster that
Yeah.
yes, fodenge.
You mentioned the role of parents. I mean, because we are talking about holistic education, education is incomplete without parents because no matter what the college or the school is trying to teach the pupil, ultimately, when they will go back home, if the value system is completely opposite, nothing is going to, nothing is going to change, nothing is going to happen. They are not going to be any different from what they are biologically programmed to be. So, what is the role of parents in terms of determining a child's future?
So I'm a young father. I have two young children, and this is a question that keeps coming to our mind, every day. If you look at how much time we spend in school, it's hardly 1/3 of the day,
Right,
right? And that is only on weekdays.
right.
Summer break, weekends, all that is spent either at home or in the society. So we kind of, I think, outsource or put too much pressure on the formal education system, while really a lot of things are happening at home. I remember my mother taking a lot of extra effort to just ensure that me and my sister we are on time, following our homework, completing the things, whatever is given to us as a summer break homework and all that. I think that pain and care that a parent would make in those early years of life of a child, I think it makes a lot of difference.
Okay, what is something that a parent should not do when it comes to a child's education?
So because we talk to a lot of parents when they are helping or deciding for the students next journey, what after school, what we found is parents also have a lot of peer pressure. It's not just the students. So this peer pressure in the minds of the parent has to be removed because that ultimately becomes the pressure on the child's mind that because their kid has done something, I want my kid also to do the same. Kids are different, and if we help to facilitate what they are interested in, I think they will flower better. I generally say this that no career in the world is such where every person is successful. No career in the world is such where no one is successful.
Right.
If you are doing the right thing which is meant for you, you will be successful. So the parent's duty is to help and enable that.
जैसे थ्री इडियट्स में एक लाइन है दैट घास काटने वाला बनो तो फिर भी नंबर वन बनो तो फिर सक्सेसफुल हो जाओ.
Exactly.
So one thing with Indian parents that I have observed is that their exposure to the career options available is very limited, and that too they have chosen a certain career options. They may have some unfulfilled dreams. So their outlook about the future of careers is based on their past. They are right now looking it through the lens of what worked 30 or 40 years ago, and they assume that the world is not any different, and they try to impose those ideas on kids as well. So by the time a kid starts thinking that what is it that I truly want to do for the rest of my life, like even when we talk about jobs, 1/3 of our life will be spent at our jobs. So kids don't get that freedom to think till they are already committed to their college. So what is a parent's role in giving that push but still not being imposing? It's a very difficult
Yeah, it's a
question.
very fine balance. And it's difficult. I mean, I don't have any ready solution because I face the same thing at my home, that my 3-year-old daughter, how much should I, enforce, and how much should I just let be? Very recent example, we were planning that we should introduce her to art. Now we took her to an art teacher. For the first time, the art teacher told her not to think of a box. She was trying to say that I have to paint inside this. And the moment that our teacher said there is no boundary, just paint everywhere, she was not able to handle that freedom.
Right.
So it's a fine line between how much we guide them and how much we let them be.
And it's very personal as well. I mean, there is no one size fits all solution. I mean, some kids require hand holding till they are 60. So yeah. Okay, we are moving on to the next segment. This is sort of a rapid fire segment. We call it 3 things. So you can be descriptive about them, but then you have to say the first things that come to your mind about these things. Okay. So 3 things that make a student an outstanding student.
I think hard work, the ability to take ownership, and courage to make mistakes.
Okay, can you elaborate?
So nothing comes without hard work. If a student feels that I'm just smart and I'll find my way through, not happening, because there are equally smarter people available outside in rest of the world. We may be smartest in our class, but when we go to the company is not our class, right?
Right.
Similar smart people have been chosen from across different campuses and are in that company.
Right.
So we have to work only through hard work. Second is, what happens is when we are making mistakes, we sometimes feel that people will not appreciate us, and that's when we stop trying things. When we do that, our growth journey kind of stagnates. If that happens, then a student will remain a student, not an outstanding student.
Right. 3 things that are missing from Indian education system.
So there is hardly anything Indian about Indian education, just that it is in India.
Okay.
If it was really an Indian education, we would be exposing students to things like culture, festivals, art, travel, food. All this is an integral part of the Indian life.
Do you think overall we are somewhere a little bit ashamed of it as well?
I think that was true definitely for a long time. I will call it like a kind of a colonial hangover. I am very happy to see a resurgence now in a kind of a civilizational reawakening. People are discovering their roots and people are feeling very proud about those roots. So now that has to kind of start reflecting in the formal system also.
Right.
Second is education itself, because what is happening is we are teaching things which were taught to us as a teacher. We are teaching things that were taught to us, not things that are needed now. And teaching as a profession itself has so many flaws that we're not able to deliver the best output to the student. Our education is becoming so theoretical, so the education itself is missing. And third is system. Even after the Britishers have left, we're now creating a new education policy, but implementation of that policy still remains a big question, because there is no strength in the system to understand the features of the policy and then to actually implement.
Right.
So I feel this as a kind of a gap where we have not prioritized education as a society. It's not an electoral agenda. It's not an economic agenda. It's not a social agenda.
China always thinks about their 100-year, 150-year plan, but we are always limited to a 5-year plan, because after 5 years, even the governments don't know whether they will be in power or not. So
The government's objective is to win the next election. That's the only objective.
They absolutely have no incentive to think beyond 5 years. And some things like education, they can't be fixed in 5 years.
What happened in China in the last 40 years is phenomenal, particularly on education. So they launched multiple projects. I'll specify 3 projects that are exemplary. So one, they started project 985. So 1998 May, they started a project. That's why they called it Project 985, whose objective was to prepare some of the universities to be globally best in the world. Some of Chinese universities to be globally best. Peking University, Tsinghua, they're all examples of this. Second is they started a project called 211, which is in the 21st century, we'll prepare 100 universities, which means they will be given additional budgets for innovation. Their research outcome will be industry driven. It will kind of lead innovation in China. Third, and the most important program that they started is called 1,000 talents plan,
Okay.
whose objective is to bring in the best minds, particularly of Chinese origin, who are now working in different parts of the world. Uh, Ideally, they would be Nobel winners, field medal winners, etc., and incentivize them to come back and make China their base.
Okay.
And since the time this program started, already 7,000 such people have come back
Come
and
back. Okay.
working in China. What they get? They get a 50 lakh rupees joining bonus. They get a grant of 1 to 1.5 crore as a startup grant. So they get a lot of leeway to innovate, to take risks, and that is what what we must appreciate and kind of adapt in our own way of how we can do something like that for
I
India.
feel if India focuses on that incentive bit as well, just inviting talent back to India.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. 3 things one should keep in mind while choosing their career.
Whether you know how to do it, do you like how to do it, and third, will the world be a better place if you do it? I think if we choose a career based on these 3 things, we'll find something that gives us meaning as well as professional success.
So, firstly, it should be something that you particularly like because you'll be spending 1/3 of your life
Correct.
doing that same thing
For a long time.
for a really long time. The second thing is it should be something that the world will want as well. And what was the third thing?
Third thing, you have to be good at it.
You have to be good at it. Okay. So, basically, more
So
or less,
even
we are on
if-
the ikigai
yeah,
path.
Yeah.
So, 3 books that one should read before they die, like your recommendations.
So one is 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
Okay.
Amazing book if you want to start something. Second is Good to Great, which is by Jim Collins, a study of how the largest companies have seen a tipping point and become great
Okay.
companies. Third book would be an almanac of Naval Ravikant.
Okay.
Very simple life tips to live a happy, meaningful life.
3 things from ancient Indian education system that we should bring back.
Evaluation system, which is extremely customized. I gave you the example of Rishi Atre and Jivak. There is no regulation, no invigilator. It's just that moral credibility of the professor who is saying that I am telling that you are now fit for the society.
Right.
Now, right now, in our system, no one is taking that accountability because people have said that if you have passed through these courses, if you have got these many grades, and if you are in a college which is somehow affiliated to something, you are good for the profession.
Right.
There is no single person taking an accountability of the relevance of that person in that job market. So definitely the invigilation or the
system.
evaluation system. Second is this whole person teaching, which is not limited to what I learn intellectually,
Right.
but how I am, how I be as a person, which includes my behavior, my discipline, my emotional maturity, which was present in our Gurukul system from early age till the university system. I think third will be connect with the society. To a large extent, our education system is disconnected. It's kind of a four-walled thing which does not talk to the society. So that's why we are not able to understand what is going on in the society, what are the problems they are facing, what are their aspirations, and then try to solve them through education. But if we look at the examples of Kautilya, of Atre, they were actually solving the problems or the opportunities of that time for the society.
The very first thing that you said is something that is already there in the Finnish, right? Finland. In the Finland education system, where the teacher has the entire authority to take a call that how well the student is doing. So then, yes, if the West can learn these things and they can incorporate them in their education system, then why can't we?
And that's how teaching will become a respected profession. Right? It will not just by saying that it's a respected profession, it will become that. We have to give that moral authority and respect to that teacher.
Absolutely. 3 things that you could change about your own education if you had the opportunity to use a time machine and go back in the past.
I would love to have more flexibility of what I'm learning. We had some, but it was largely confined towards engineering.
Right.
I would have loved to study other things. And I would have loved if I knew before choosing a course on what that course means. And it would have been good if it was taught in an applied way where I'm actually seeing something happening from what I'm learning.
More practical hands-on
practical.
experience. So I was watching some videos about Rishihoood University where where there was gamification of education that was happening. That education is not just what is written in textbooks. There was a little bit of freedom to explore, a little bit to learn, more hands-on experience. So can you elaborate on that?
I'll give you a small example. So we teach entrepreneurship to the students. So one way is to find a marketing book, sales book, and then teach these other different concepts of sales, etc. So while we are teaching them these concepts, it is also important for them to apply and find out how relevant that concept is, and particularly how relevant it is for me. So we told them that you go and find out a micro vendor. Maybe outside the campus there is someone who is making paranthas, like street shop. Can you go and help them increase their sales? So through that process, you will learn how sales really happen. Because first step in that will be just to convince that person that you will be able to help.
Okay.
Because you will face rejection right there. You are going with all these noble intentions that now I will
First you have
change
to
the
get
economy.
hired.
Correct. First you have to sell yourself,
Yeah.
and then you will be able to sell that business to the customer.
Right.
So that's how we gamify, and then it becomes a class project, and different people are trying different things to increase the sales of their respective clients. So one way to gamify education, make it more practical and applied.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're starting the second segment. I kind of usually take it very different from what he does. He has a set of few questions. I was observing how the conversation was growing. So I'm going to I had a few questions planned, and I'm also going to go a little off track and stuff.
Okay.
So when a lot of people find that there are problems, their answer to those is only going to be crib. Some people will probably do something about it. Very few people actually take the step to say, okay, I think the education system is problematic, so I'm going to open a university to fix it. So tell me about your journey, because this is not something everybody does.
So when I was in college, I on one hand I was shocked to find out what an engineering education is, which was not of my taste. I mean, it is good education for a lot of people, not meant for me. And on the other hand, I found mentors and peers who were constantly thinking that let's try to fix, let's not just crib, but find out what we can do. What happened in that BTech journey at IIT Delhi was I was actively involved in a volunteer group to teach in a nearby slum. There is a slum called Munirka just next to IIT. We would go there in the evenings and meet the children there, all coming from extremely low income backgrounds. Their parents are working as a cook, as a driver, as a guard. And we were teaching them in the evenings. And in that process, I don't know how much we taught them, but we learned a lot on really what is going on in the society. So that was, first input to my own journey. Then what we would do is after every semester, we would go and park ourselves in a rural area, talk to an NGO, understand what kind of work they are doing, what impact it is making in the lives of people. And that gave us a kind of a role model that, we also have to be like that and solve for people rather than just, think what is the issue.
Right.
Third thing that happened was those days when I was in college, this large India Against Corruption movement came up.
Right.
And as a young 20-year-old, I was extremely fascinated that this is how large systemic change can happen through policy reforms or governance reforms. So was quite active in that movement, kind of in the core group of our campus, and also ended up being arrested once when we were going for a protest. But that gave me a lot of exposure and interest in public policy as a field and systemic reforms, as an outcome. So when I was finishing college, there is a rule at IIT Delhi that you have to submit your CV at before a certain date to sit for placements.
Right.
So I thought if I do it, then I'll be kind of lured into that placement thing. So I didn't submit my CV, which means that I had to find something outside.
Right.
So then I talked to my mentor, and we thought that let's start something towards solving in the education space, particularly when we saw that there's so much of young talent which is aspiring to do something. I mean, the times were clearly changing after the India Against Corruption movement, and that whole timing was such that we could feel that energy among young people trying to find out what they can do. But we couldn't find any platform which is giving that structure to their journey. So we decided that we'll make something through which that leadership potential of young students can come out,
Okay.
and they can solve social problems through their education.
Right. Can you tell me about what you learned teaching those slum kids? Because I think that will tell our viewers a lot about how doing things outside the typical actual education system can actually change you.
I think in most of our life, we are with people who are like us.
Right.
And that was the first time when I was interacting with people whom I had so less to, share with.
Right.
Coming from a background where I was speaking in English, I have a smartphone access, I'm learning at the best of the institutions. And here is a family which is in a 8 feet by 8 feet room. Probably 5 or 6 of them are,
Right.
staying, I mean, living in that
Yeah,
room.
yeah.
Their kitchen is also a part of that same room, because
Right.
kitchen basically is a stove, is a small stove for them. When we are teaching those kids, we are sitting on that bed. So when we have occupied the bed, other people in the family cannot, be
Right.
sitting there. So they have to go somewhere
Right.
out. They don't have a toilet attached. Common toilets for all houses in a slum at a 100-200 meter walk.
Right.
So it tells you that uh, life is different for different people, and you have to be comfortable in being among those who are not like you.
Right.
And that helped me later, because then to build a connection, a relation, just being comfortable in the company of people became very easy for me. For people who are there, for them education is the most important key for them to take the next leap in their economic progress.
Right. For us, education might just be selecting whichever fancy university,
Yeah.
whichever university catches our eye and what
Correct.
we want to do, etc.
Correct.
For them, it is like, मेरे बच्चे को यहीं रहना ना पड़े, इसलिए
Exactly.
education
For
ज़रूरी है
them,
उनके
that's
लिए.
the only key to
Yeah.
a prosperous future.
Right. And you mentioned that you visited different states and spoke to different NGOs. So where did you visit? What were the NGOs and what issues were they tackling?
So it was a whole lot of things. So we visited an NGO in Gonda in Uttar Pradesh,
Okay.
a very small place where they were trying to innovate on agriculture. It was an agricultural belt, and they were trying to provide seeds, soil information, weather patterns, and based on that, some practices which will enhance their agricultural output. We went to a place in Alwar in Rajasthan, and the person is trying to solve for water because it's a drought-prone area. We went to a place in Pune, and they're trying to provide skilling-based education in slum areas.
Right.
So things like textile, right? Stitching,
Okay.
knitting,
Yeah.
so that the people who are living there, especially women, they can quickly add to the family income,
Right,
because
right.
they're living at just that edge.
Right. Exactly.
We went to a Naxal-infected area in Chhattisgarh,
Interesting.
and learned how the lives of some of the Vanvasi people, were transformed by this NGO, which was trying to, bring them back from
Right.
the Naxal influence. So just that exposure told us the variety of problems and opportunities, that exist in the country. And because we saw someone who dedicated their life, 20 years, 30 years in solving that problem,
Right.
it created a role modeling, for us, that
Right.
we can also do it, or we
Right.
must do it.
Whenever we look at this whole country, one of the things that strikes me is that there are two distinct Indias. There is like the urban India, which is really comfortable with everything. They use smartphones, they're savvy, they're tech savvy, they travel and they do all these things, everything. And on the other hand, you have the rural, the other part, the end part, Bharat, which I'm pretty sure also has aspirational kids, but then they don't get the same access to everything. How, in your opinion, being in the education field, can we let those people, the aspiring kids from Bharat, actually find their footing? Because say somebody who was born in Mumbai, or even somebody who was born in any other tier 1 city or even tier 2 city, they don't have the same starting point as, say, somebody who is born in a village or like a town or something like that. So how do we push the starting points for these people?
One thing that fortunately has happened is that now people have the access to same information
Right, because of the internet.
because of the internet, and internet penetration and device penetration is decent
Okay.
in India.
Right.
I think around 70% of Indian population is an active user of
Okay.
the internet, which is a very high number.
Right.
So because of this, what is happening is people are consuming similar kind of content. So their aspirations are also becoming similar, because they are seeing the
Right,
same
of course.
role models, same celebrities
Yeah.
and everything. But they don't have the means
Yeah.
do it. So we have to cater to this aspiration of people who don't have the means but want to achieve something. I think it's for the first time that we are seeing a generation. I mean, people who are, let's say, up to 15 or 20 years of age right now. We are seeing a generation whose aspirations or exposure is not limited to their family environment,
Right.
which was true when we were growing up.
Right, I'm sure, yeah.
Our thought process, our choices would be largely dominated by which environment we are growing
Right.
up. Now that's not the case.
Right.
So when that's not the case, then they're also looking for an education that can create that leap for them.
Right. Right.
So it becomes an issue of a demand and supply. There is a
Okay.
high amount of demand from that aspiring population of Bharat
Right.
to access such an education,
Right.
but that supply is not there.
Right.
10,000 seats for 10 lakh people, right?
Right.
5,000 seats for 25 lakh people in need. So that's the kind of mismatch
Yeah.
that is there. So it becomes very important for us as Indians to establish more and more high quality institutions.
Like you mentioned that 10 lakh people will probably give, I'm assuming, JE. So, and 24 lakh people gave the NEET. And I was like, these figures should alarm everybody.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to a teacher, and he said, I asked him, why are 24 lakh people giving NEET? Because I find it hard to believe that in this 1 year, there are 24 lakh students who feel that medicine and being a doctor is their purpose in life. Because medicine is such a grueling field that you don't get into it if you're not interested. For example, I am scared of blood. I am scared of needles. Every time I have a blood test, I need to have Abhiraj and I need to hold him and not look at the person drawing my blood.
Yeah.
That's how scared I am. So it would be a mockery if I went into medicine and tried to draw a patient's blood, because I would be like, I can't deal. So how? So I feel like this gap is there because people don't know of like new age career options that are popping up.
I think so, because at certain point in time, I was also of the opinion that now doctor engineer is not the only thing. People have so many options, but then when we look at these numbers, we feel that is doctor and engineer is it the only thing? Because still so many people are
Right.
competing for those exams. So perhaps for a lot of people, a stable, prosperous career would still mean getting into this kind of a profession of a computer scientist or a doctor or a lawyer. I think these new age careers have become a kind of a fashion statement. A lot of people explore them because they have the means
Right.
to do that. May not happen for a large section of the society as far as we can see. What we also see is a lot of people do programs like BA, BSc, BCom, right? These are like simple graduation programs. These are
Right.
not professional programs. And unemployment after such programs is also quite high. It's
Right.
around 48% for BCom, people who are graduate
That is so
unemployed.
surprising.
Right? Probably a lot of them were thinking to become a CA,
Right.
earlier when they enrolled for a BA. For BTech also, the unemployment rates are around 40%, which means somehow the curriculum and the job requirements are not fitting. But if we look at what people are doing after that, it becomes even more concerning, because people are doing graduation because they have to become eligible for a government job. A large section of
Right.
people is doing it.
Right.
I was reading a recent study which says 7 crore people, 7 crore
Wow.
are giving a government exam every year.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. That
That is like a 5% population of a country is sitting for a government exam every year,
We should be more concerned about government exams.
which means something is not right.
Right. You mentioned that engineering education was not something that people are told before they apply. So, what is this dichotomy? Because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who will watch this and then maybe they'll understand what they're, in for once they choose that.
Yeah. So when we're preparing, we're largely preparing for 3 subjects, which is physics, chemistry, and maths.
Right.
So maths has some relevance across all engineering disciplines. Physics to a certain extent. Chemistry is very limited in its applicability to other fields of engineering. If we leave chemical engineering and biotech engineering or textile engineering, chemistry as a subject is not as relevant.
Right.
And the kind of work or the approach to deal with these subjects in an engineering degree is very different. It's
Okay.
very applied. We take a concept of maths and then we have to apply it on a real thing, right? So for example, my course was on thermodynamics.
Okay.
Now it's a complicated topic. Physics was easy. Thermodynamics for me was, when thermodynamics in physics was easy, but thermodynamics to create a rocket propulsion, equation
Right.
was a very different thing. It requires a lot of brain,
Right.
which somehow we, I think, lose when we get into the college. So if you are really passionate about technology and engineering, I think that is when you should enter that field. Otherwise, now so many new fields have emerged. I think people should really look at business as an option, because finally we all end up working in a business environment.
Right.
Irrespective of what we learn,
Right.
we have to operate in a business.
Right.
So that skill to operate in a business successfully, I think that is what is missing. It is not taught in other degrees. So you're not hear a doctor learning business skills in their education, a lawyer,
Right.
an engineer. No other degree would teach you business skills. Even the business degrees
Yeah.
don't teach us the real business skills.
Right.
But the irony is, ultimately, all of us end up there in a
Right.
business environment.
Right.
So that's the most important skill to be learned.
I was wondering about the same thing. I was like, I wrote a post on LinkedIn actually that I feel sales is a very under-respected and
for
discipline
me.
that that people, like all people associate with those are telemarketers who'll call them and then you'll give them a few bad words, you'll cut their call and stuff like that. But I was like, sales is so crucial and so many of us don't know sales, because for so many years I was like, we're kind of like taught, don't talk too much about yourself, otherwise people will think that you're arrogant. But that is exactly what sales is. Now that we're doing like a content business, that's what it is. It's us talking to a lot of different companies or doing outreaches and talking to them about ourselves. So it's so weird that the things, the skills that we're supposed to be taught, we're not being taught. So on that, I'm going to ask you a question. What are some skills that you feel should definitely be taught to students, that there must have skills that students should have?
I think money skills.
Okay.
What is money, how to earn money, how to save money, how to lose money. This is people are completely unaware of it till the time they get their first salary.
Right.
That's too late. It's just too late. What we have done is we have introduced a concept of an opening balance
Okay.
for our students. So everyone, when they join the college, they get a 10,000 rupees opening balance.
Okay.
And then they are guided on how to invest.
All right.
What is the stock market, how markets operate, what's a good investment, what's a bad investment, those kind of things, so that they become comfortable with the idea of money and with the idea
Right.
of saving.
Right.
And Einstein said the compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah.
So if we really learn how to save well, we're kind of sorted for life. Second is team and communication skills.
Right.
It is so ironical that we know that finally all of us have to work in teams,
Right.
when we graduate out of college. But all our evaluations happen as an individual.
Yeah.
So we are always taught that we have to compete against someone.
Yeah.
And either you are number one or number two or number three. We are not told that as a group we are a winner.
Right.
For namesake, we sometimes do a group work, we
Group
give give some assignments and all that. But real world is teamwork, right? You're an individual contributor only in some roles.
Right.
Mostly you have to make your team successful.
That's
And I think
correct,
that is
yeah.
not taught. Third, reflecting back on my old experience from the slum, being with people who are different than you.
All right.
That is not told to us at all. Having a certain routine or a discipline in life is sometimes felt that this is homework. You have to learn on your own or through your family or somewhere. Formally in education, we can't be teaching you this stuff, but that is what makes or breaks a great career.
Right. So now circling back to your Rishihood, I want to talk about the name. That's not a very usual
Usual name, yeah.
So how did you decide on the name?
Actually, it's extremely unusual. Why? Because so this name comes from Swami Vivekananda's lectures, and it so happened that when we decided to build a university, the first major task is to find where that university will be. So we find a
Right.
land to build that. So we found a land, and then we had to put that on Google Maps.
Okay.
So the moment we have to put on Google Maps, there has to be a name.
That's-
Till that time, there was
yeah.
no name of the university. And some of our other board members, they called me that now we have to put it on Google Maps. So let's quickly finalize a name. In in those days I was reading the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, and in those lectures it just came up, and it was kind of a eureka moment where he says that leaders of our societies are not kings. Indian society, the leaders have not been kings but rishis. People who have that wisdom to guide the society. And when we achieve that state, that is rishihood. Just like the state of being a mother is motherhood, the state of being a child is childhood, the state of being a rishi is rishihood.
All right.
So he coined this word because it's a Sanskrit and English mixture.
Right.
So that no one used this word before him, no one used this word after him. So I felt that that's a very appropriate word to depict the purpose of education, that take the students and ourselves to the state of being a rishi.
Since the name is so deeply inspired by Swami Vivekananda, I'm assuming his other lessons have also kind of like seeped into the curriculum and how you instruct the students. So what are some of the values and lessons from Swami Vivekananda that are actually taught at Rishihood?
Yeah. So he emphasized a lot on physical fitness.
Okay.
He would say that play sports, do football, etc. So sports is a compulsory part of learning at Rishihood. A lot of our campus culture is inspired by spiritual values. So we kind of create a conducive platform where someone can practice yoga, someone can do meditation. We have a full-time life and spiritual coach on campus. So he guides the students on their emotional issues, guides the students on how to navigate complexities of life, relationship issues. So all that needs kind of spiritual and emotional grounding. And then Swami Vivekananda used to say that education is the perfection, is the manifestation of perfection already in us.
Okay.
So there is a lot of knowledge and power within us, and then education is supposed to uncover that.
Okay.
And that is the approach that we take in teaching the students, that already they are aware, and we just have to give them an opportunity, a situation.
Right.
For example, when we push them into field work, it's a situation in which a lot of that will get uncovered when they will interact with the society.
Right.
We do an interesting practice called the 100-kilometer walk.
Okay.
Where they're taken on foot to walk for 100 kilometers over 2 days. I also walked. So 50 kilometers one day, stop somewhere, come back 50 kilometers. So it's not just a strength of physical stamina, it's a mental stress test.
Right.
How much can we bear?
Yeah.
And that's the resilience that finally is also tested in the real world when we go out and either work or in our family or in the society, anywhere.
Right. Interesting. I wanted to touch upon this, that a lot of times when I'm interacting with students, sometimes I find that a lot of them may not want to work, or they may have a lot of preconceived notions and stuff like that. You deal with students on a day-to-day basis. So have you noticed that, of course, there'll be some students who will shine, who will be go-getters, who will want to work really hard, but there will be some students who will probably not want to put themselves out there, but come in with a lot of baggage and preconceived notions. So then how do you deal with those things? How do you help a student achieve their true potential?
It's I think, an issue of the right role modeling.
Okay.
So people are generally not exposed to what it means to be in a professional environment, or what it means to work. So they will have their own notions on work, or maybe they will have a notion that I really don't need to work if they're coming from that kind of a family background. And I'm not someone who believes that everyone must work. And I'm absolutely comfortable if someone decides that I want peace and I will be at home. Right. Absolutely fine with it. What we do is to provide that environment and that role modeling. One, we are a fully residential campus.
Okay.
So everyone stays on campus. Most of the faculty also stays on campus. For students, it's compulsorily a residential environment. So that learning is not a 9 to 5 kind of a thing, which creates a lot of inefficiencies in the learning. When we are in that environment throughout,
right,
we are talking to people. We are learning from different perspectives across years, across departments. So that helps in nurturing the mind. Then we bring in a lot of people from outside continuously. Almost on a day-to-day basis, we'll have 2 to 3 people coming from outside for a guest talk, for a mentorship session, for a book talk, something like that, which really changes the kind of exposure the students have.
Right. So you mentioned in the beginning that the indic value we need to bring is of assessment. So how do you do assessments at Rishihood? Because if everything is so open, then how do you know that the student is ready?
Yeah. So right now we are governed, in a framework
I'm sure the UGC guidelines
Correct.
will be
So
there.
there are some guidelines that we follow. Within those guidelines, whatever innovation is possible, we do that. We have not yet reached a stage in India where we can say that the professor will have the autonomy to declare a student graduate.
Right.
They have to,
Still do the tests
pass
and the
certain
exams,
things.
yeah.
But the way those assignments or those evaluations are designed, that is where we innovate. For example, group work is really given a lot of weightage in our assessments. Some of the exams are open book.
Okay.
So we are not really testing them on how much they cram and reproduce. We are testing them that this information is available, and now really all information is available freely to everyone.
Right.
What use can we make of that information to solve a problem?
Right.
A lot of one interesting exam that we created was the students didn't have to answer; they had to create questions in that exam. So the ability we keep saying that we have to develop critical thinking in the students, but how do we really do that?
Yeah.
Do the students develop a mindset to ask the right questions?
That's true.
And we tested them on how better questions were they asking.
I noticed that you spoke about taking risks, and what I realized about the Indian society is that at every point in time, from your upbringing to the education system until the time even when you do a job, the whole system is structured in such a way that you should
Risk-averse.
not take any risks at all.
Yeah.
Like the whole attitude is of a coddling parent saying that my child should not fall and get hurt. But that is precisely the nature of whatever you do in life. You take a risk. Even when you choose an educational, like what stream you want to do, science, arts, commerce, it's a risk that you're taking, that you might do it and it might not work out. Like I did CA, but then I thought this is not something I want to do for the rest of my life, so I quit it. So what do you think about that?
I think risk and reward, they go in parallel. The higher risk we take, the higher is our chance of reward. The reason why our society is a risk-averse society, I think the reason is in our history.
Right.
We are coming out of a large period of invasions and colonization.
Right.
And then a very weak economy,
Of course.
a very fragile polity, and all that. Now I think the opportunity is very right.
Right.
The time is right for this generation to take the next leap, because what has happened is our parents and the generations prior to them have created a kind of an endowment for us which allows us to take risks.
Right.
This opportunity was simply not available.
Yeah,
so we
for
can't
the
blame them.
parents. No, yeah.
Simply
of
not
course,
available.
Of course.
They had to just do something to
Of
make
course.
both ends meet.
Of course.
But if we don't do that now, we'll lose an opportunity that has come after a really long time.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine when would be the last time a young population with this kind of an endowment would be there in a
Right.
country like India.
Right. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this because I think this is very interesting. So, if you were to ask a student to take risks, then what are some things that person would have to bear in mind? Because I am also someone who thinks about this because I feel like this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity that India has, and I keep saying कि अगर हम सही खेल गए तो फिर it will genuinely be a golden period.
Yeah.
So, and I know that people have to take risks and achieve their true potential. So, what are some things that they should bear in mind? Because I'm sure for a lot of people, it'll be like the edge of the diving board ki मैं यहाँ तक आ गया, but I can't take that jump, which is the risk. So, what would you advise them?
I think when we take risks, our only fear is of failure.
Right.
And there is some kind of a taboo in our social context against failing. If we look at Israel as an example, they celebrate failure.
Right. Interesting.
It's known as a startup nation.
Yeah.
We know that highest per capita startups coming out of Israel, solving some very complex problems of agriculture, of defense, of water. What is happening is that, for example, what happens there is when a startup fails, people would come together to celebrate something like a birthday.
Oh.
That now you've done this
Huh.
and you've learned a lot, and now let's go to the next thing.
Right.
Right? So, can we imagine something like this in India, where
Right.
failing is celebrated?
Right.
And the right way to do it is do it very early in life.
Right. Right.
Because when we become comfortable with failures, then we can keep taking bigger risks.
Right. Then you're bulletproof.
But what we are doing in our schooling is we are kind of proofing them from failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, officially, we can't fail students because they just have to get past and reach a certain level, and then they realize, oh, I was not meant to be here. So we have to be comfortable and make them fail early in life so that they can learn those lessons and then take higher risks.
But for example, say somebody is 18 or 20 years old and they want to take this risk. What are some things? Are there any resources you can point them to, or are there some things that they should bear in mind when they're taking risk? Apart from the failure perspective, because the failure one is a very good and a very important thing. Because I know even till date, if I do something and then I fail at it, I feel very scared. Ki, galti hua hai. And it's taken a lot of conditioning to be like, it's okay, you just learn. I guess for engineers it's easier because you're used to iteration, so then you're like, okay, one iteration failed, I will
Do the next.
do the next one. But it's not so for other people. So
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
can students or anybody who's like in the 18 to 20 age group do this?
Yeah. So, at that age, our failures are very, small failures. What
Right.
will we fail in?
Right.
We'll try a project and it will not work.
Right.
And what's the harm?
Right.
So it's a mental barrier.
Right.
It will not impact us financially. It will not impact us socially. It will not impact us academically. It is just something that we tried and didn't work out.
Right.
And that should not really be even seen as a failure, because that's an attempt. That's a
Right.
trial. That
Right.
that goes in any innovation process. But once we cross that age, when we are, let's say, in the working age group, we have an economic dependence.
Right.
That is when taking failure becomes a little
Difficult.
So the solution to do at that age group is reduce your needs.
Yeah. Okay.
Because mostly when the fear of failure comes from how much can I lose,
Right.
and that how much can I lose depends on how much do I need.
Right.
So if I minimize my needs, and again minimize the needs is possible when we are younger.
Right.
When you're in your early 20s or
Right.
even till maybe your late 20s, that is when very few people depend on you.
Right.
And if you can minimize your needs at that time, you don't feel that, oh, I have to have an iPhone, I have to have a 2 BHK independent house and all that. Those are the needs that we have artificially created for ourselves.
Right. Right.
If rather than that, I invest that luxury into my risk taking,
Right.
we'll fail fast, we'll learn fast, we'll grow fast.
Right. Interesting. I noticed that Rishihoood has very limited number of courses. Some universities will have a whole wide array of courses, but there are very few limited courses in Rishihoood. Is that very intentional?
It's very intentional and also to some extent situational, because we are a new university. So we can't create excellence in
Right.
100 different faculties or 100 different subjects. So we have chosen things that are close to our heart and things that we feel are needed in India's growth journey. So we have 4 fields. We have technology. I think that's prime lever of India's growth. Second is entrepreneurship, which again, is something that India needs. In fact, historically, India has been a very enterprising society.
Okay.
I was just thinking about it. I couldn't find a word, a Hindi word for unemployment. We talk about berozgar. That's an Urdu word.
Right.
But there is no popular Hindi word for unemployment.
Which probably speaks to the society back then.
Correct.
ki-
It was a largely self-reliant,
Right.
Atmanirbhar kind of society. Everyone had a
Something to
to
do,
do, right?
Yeah.
So entrepreneurship is, I think, the other driver of India's next journey. Third is design, which is underrated. I think severely underrated. We talk a lot of make in India,
Yeah.
but manufacturing only has a certain leverage.
Right.
The real leverage comes from design, because one design
of
you can
course.
replicate.
Of course. Of course.
So what
yeah.
Apple is doing is not making in California; it's designing,
It's designing.
in California.
Yeah,
So
they
when you
say
open
it also. They say it
designed in
also,
California,
designed.
right? Designed by Apple in California.
Yeah.
It's getting manufactured in Chennai and China.
Wherever.
So I think that's the next power that we have to unlock. We have
Right.
very few really designed in India,
Right.
kind of
Right.
products.
And designed well.
and designed
designed
well. And when that happens, design is also a carrier of culture. Right? It's
Right.
not just an economic power.
Right.
When there is a designed in India product, and when that goes global,
Right.
it's also carrying a culture with it.
Right. Right. And like to my knowledge, the only thing that I feel we have truly properly designed is on a tech front is UPI, I guess, because I've
Yeah.
not seen anything that is so seamless.
Correct.
Which
Correct.
is
Yep. World's
something
best
that-
payment solution.
something that benefits both me and the receiver of funds also.
Absolutely.
I mean, people will just be like, I've seen auto rickshaw walas in Mumbai also be like, हाँ ठीक है, you don't have money, I don't have change, just pay me online. And they, even if they don't get a payment notification for it, they're like, हाँ ठीक है, आ जाएगा. So there is trust
Trust
in the
also.
system
Yeah.
that
I agree.
I will get the money.
Yeah.
And I think that for a low trust society like India, that is fantastic. For people to have trust कि हाँ ठीक है, आपके साइड से गया है, मुझे आ जाएगा, is such a huge thing. Like it's very interesting that you mentioned design, because when you look at a lot of Indian, say, like modern Indian architecture or anything, it's very ugly.
And what is Indian about it?
There's nothing Indian about it. I mean, we are here in front of our studio. There are so many glass buildings, and in the summer, we literally have like 2 suns because it reflects the sunlight when it's setting. And I'm like, this is so stupid. It's not fit for a country like India. But
That's how design carries culture with it. I mean, we're sitting on a certain kind of furniture. This is not the way we used to sit, I mean, historically. I mean,
Right.
Now we do, but if we were to think from first principles and create furniture, probably
Right.
something else would come out. I don't know,
Right.
but probably something else would come out from
Right.
that design. The way we eat, the way we dress, the way we create a mobile phone. Probably there are new dimensions which are totally unexplored because we have not thought of it from a design in India perspective. Everyone in life should at least use their passport once,
Right.
which means basically have an exposure to another culture, which will tell you the benchmarks they've built for themselves.
Right.
And then when you come back, then you start questioning that, are we really pushing us enough?
Right.
That is what we need to do in design also.
So my next question was, when a student enters a school, they're like a mound of clay. They have to be molded. And depending on their molding, it determines what sort of a person they're going to be, what sort of a person they'll end up being in society, what interests they actually have in certain subjects. Like my father always says that he never liked science because he had a very strict physics teacher. So many things depend on your teachers, and it's such a luck of the draw that you may get a good and a passionate teacher, or you may have one teacher that puts you off that subject for the rest of your life. So in your opinion, what makes a good teacher? How can for those who are interested in doing teaching, how can they mold students the right way in such a way that the students excel and they don't end up damaging the student?
I think the whole profession of teaching is kind of reinventing itself now, because for a long time, teaching was about passing on information, because
Right.
that information was not available somewhere else, right? Now, education is not an information problem. A child can search anything anywhere, and that kind of has created a laziness in the student to learn, because they feel that whenever I need some information, I'll just find it. Why do I need to learn it now? So the role has suddenly shifted towards not an information problem, but an inspiration problem. How will a teacher inspire a student to the habit of learning or to the habit of finding deeper
Right.
truths?
Right.
And that requires a different skill than perhaps what the teaching profession was doing till now.
Right.
That requires theatrics.
Right.
That requires gamifying education. That requires thinking of newer dimensions of learning, not just what has been existing so far, but can we really try to push the boundaries of knowledge further? And in that reinvention, I think whenever we try to remember who were our favorite teachers, we would find those who kind of inspired us to do something, not just people who informed us about
Right.
something.
We're in the world of AI right now. Things around us are changing very rapidly. How our parents and grandparents worked is not the same way we're working. And now we have toddlers who can do all sorts of stuff on phones. So we've seen a very rapid evolution. How has the office or the workplace changed in all these years, and what is its future?
Yeah. So workplace has been changing, throughout history. The nature of jobs has been changing. In fact, there is a study which tells us that if we look at an 80-year history of jobs, the jobs that we have now, 60% of them didn't exist in 1940. So there's a massive change in just the kind of work that we
Right.
do.
Right.
And now, because of AI and AI's entry into different technologies such as automation, such as robotics, the pace has suddenly gone exponential. Sometimes I feel that the pace of change has become higher than our pace of comprehending that change.
Right.
So it is just happening so fast, and because of that, the future of work is going to change. People say that a lot of new jobs will emerge. I think definitely jobs will emerge, but those will be very complex, jobs for a certain type of people who understand that domain. I think for a large section of the society, we will face a lack of work.
Right.
It does not mean facing a lack of wealth. There may be other ways humans will figure out to create wealth. But really, when we talk about work, I feel there is going to be a lack of work. Therefore, there is going to be an excess of time. And what do we do with that time is going to be a big question in front of we as a human civilization, because that can be a very disturbing question. When we have time and we don't know what to do with it.
Right.
That's where the crisis of meaning emerges. हम क्यों हैं? And to find that question is going to be the next frontier that humans have to solve.
Very interesting. Like we took a break last week and I was forcing myself to not to do anything. Like I am going to do nothing. And I was so, I had so many different thoughts. Ki, can I just sit and look at the view without doing anything? Is that okay? And I had so many other questions. It drives you mad in the beginning thinking that I can do something, but I'm not doing anything.
It's going to be extremely difficult, and I think that's where also Indian spirituality, yoga has a role to play. Our minds now have been so wired, so differently wired, that we want some, trigger in the mind.
Right.
They're not comfortable with an absence of a trigger.
Right.
Whereas the whole purpose of yoga is to dissolve all triggers.
Right.
To be absolutely still. So I think from a journey of extreme triggers to zero triggers is what we'll have to traverse now.
Interesting. Now, since you're a person who's interested in policy as a whole, in trends, in geopolitics, in the way things work, what role do you think education has in building a nation? Because it can truly make or break a nation from what we observe globally. And what do you think is the opportunity for India in this space in the future?
I think historically, if we see, we were discussing about India's journey in first 15,000 years of the AD, 1500 years. Our economic power, our political power, and our educational strengths were kind of seen together, going together. Then there was a time when the university system collapsed. We were colonized, and we're kind of trying to rebuild it now. At that time, around 13th, 14th century is when Nalanda collapsed, and after that, collapse started happening. Around 17th century is when new universities started to emerge in the US, which is now let's say the superpower. So what was happening in that evolution of the university system in the US is quite interesting, because so there's a person called Ernest Boyer who has done some study on how universities emerged. It's a report published by Carnegie Foundation. So he traces the journey of the oldest university, which is Harvard, around 400 years ago, Yale, similar time. So these universities at 17th, 18th century, what they're emerging as is divinity schools. So their purpose at that time in the American society was to teach people, mostly males, about religion, about morals, ethics, values, and send them as men of character. That was the role of a university.
Interesting.
Yale University, named after Yale. So this person, Yale, was in Madras Presidency.
Right.
And he created a loot here, transferred that wealth to the US. So we are seeing a transfer of wealth, a transfer of power, a transfer of knowledge.
Right.
To a whole different continent. Right. And then for a long time, for around 100 years, that was the primary role of an American university. Then people started thinking that there should be some applicability of whatever is happening in a university. They can't be just doing morals and religious teachings. So that is when a lot of American expansion in terms of its economic progress was happening. Railroads, canals, machinery, sugar mills, agriculture, all that was happening. And through the support of the government, universities were established which were very applied in their nature. So applied research, that the word was a word that came up during those times.
Okay.
particularly around topics like agriculture and machinery, where university professors and students worked very closely with, let's say, a farmer to figure out what they need and develop equipment that can support them in their agriculture.
Right.
And the US produce, its
Right.
produce went up significantly.
Right.
And then the third phase of the university was when they went into fundamental research,
Right.
basic research, which is scientific research. So from a divinity, school to an applied, agriculture kind of school to a fundamental science school. That is the journey that American, education has seen in around 300 years. Because of that, now, because of the emphasis on scientific research, America has emerged as the superpower.
Right.
The glaring example of this is Oppenheimer.
Right.
Oppenheimer was a professor at University of California, Berkeley, where he did all the research,
Right.
which gave America the strength to win the World War, and that just continues in different domains. Now we see that in Israel, we see that in China, we see that in Japan, in South Korea. So the country's progress and its educational strength, they go together, because that is how research and innovation happens. I think now the opportunity is available in India, and we could have done this earlier, but at least we must definitely do it now, because our macro factors are in place. Our economy is growing positively, our polity is stable, we have a demographic dividend, we are a middle income country by and large, where we have savings, so we can reinvest, and we must reinvest in top quality education, research and development, because that is what will provide strength to India's next growth journey. Recent example of the opportunity we have is Agnikul,
Right.
new satellite,
Right.
world's first 3D printed satellite launcher.
Yeah.
So an amazing innovation, incubated at IIT Madras. IIT Madras happens to have one of the best innovation ecosystems in the
Right.
country. I think those are the kind of models that we now need to replicate. Another opportunity that India has is in terms of costs.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Right.
so India, because the cost of living and the cost of operations is low, we can become a global study destination if
Right.
we really provide good quality.
Right.
Almost similar kind of quality can be provided in India at a lower cost
Okay.
if we compare to, let's say, a Western country, or even to Singapore. Uh, so study in India, basically, just like we have Make in India, can we position India as a study destination, especially for the lower income countries, because they also don't have the means to access a top education in Europe, US or
Right.
Singapore, unless they get a scholarship.
Right.
So that wide gap is there, which we can solve. If we do that, then we are attracting the best talent from these places to
Right.
come and work
Come
and
here,
study in
yes,
India.
yes.
That is exactly what the US has done. That is exactly what
Exactly.
China has done. Just attract the right talent to come and be situated in your country, and they will do rest of the things. So how do we become a talent magnet? That is one thing. Second is in terms of skilled workforce. India has an opportunity to supply skilled people globally, because we are the only young large demography left on the planet. Other countries, especially the developed world, is facing a workforce crisis. They just don't have people to do basic work. We saw stories of how luggage is just left unattended, and airports are facing a
True.
crisis.
True.
People are not available there to work. Nurses, dentists, teachers, accountants, there's just so many professions where we can be that supplier of talent
Right.
to the world. And Indians also have the advantage, culturally we are very adjustable and very
Right.
sober. You
Right.
will not see Indians in jails,
Right.
in so many countries, right? But
Right.
our diaspora is there. We'll
Right.
rather see Indians as CEOs.
Right.
In fact, now the joke in the US is, if you want to be a CEO, you have to be an Indian.
Right.
And I'll give you an example of what a recent statement by Shantanu Narayan, who is the CEO of Adobe, and for a long time he has been the CEO of Adobe, transformed Adobe's futures. He recently made a statement that if he was growing up in India now, he would have never left and gone to the US. So there is an opportunity that exists now for great talent to build things in India. That's why we are seeing a rise in unicorns. That's why we are seeing so many startups. That's why we're seeing young people getting interested in startups. That's why a show like Shark Tank is becoming so popular. So there is this positive sentiment among the Indian youth. This whole emotion has to be channelized in the right direction.
Right. Right. Cool. And on that note, with this we've taken the podcast to the right direction. So I hope you guys really enjoyed watching it. Thank you so much, Sahil, for giving
Thanks a lot,
us your
Niyu.
time and for coming here. And I hope you enjoyed the
I
conversation.
absolutely
as well.
enjoyed it thoroughly. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this conversation. Tell us how we can improve. We have an email ID dedicated so that you can give us feedback. If you have any suggestions in terms of which guests we can have next, tell us over there. Thank you so much for watching, क्योंकि आपके support से हमें फर्क पड़ता है.